Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Good to be home, although I didn't feel that way on Friday for whatever the reason. I'll explain later, as I've got some sports news and topics to catch up on, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as last Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And yes, you can see no palm trees, no greenery, no tall buildings in a metropolis like Miami or downtown Brickell. The home office is back in full effect. And of course, I'll put a lid on my trip at the back end of the podcast, so you definitely won't want to miss what had transpired here over the last week, as I caught you up last Monday from the first part of my trip in Orlando and Kissimmee, Florida. So yes, you definitely want to stay tuned for that. And before we begin, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, I got it right here. Look at that, people. Banana cream OLIPOP, that's right. If you go to drinkolipop.com, you will get 15% off of your order. So buy a case, buy 2, buy 10. It's summertime. Beat the heat, quench your thirst with great flavors such as banana cream. Let me pull that up again. They have all the classics, people. So if you're a guy or gal that just likes the vintage cola or root beer or even grape orange to kind of take you back to your childhood, they have those. But they also have this type of flavor here, banana cream. You're probably thinking, what? There should be no way that a soda should be made from bananas. Well, guess what? They do have this. They have strawberry vanilla. They also have cherry cola, which is more of a classic flavor. I dig it. But also my favorite, tropical punch, which is out of my fridge. It's already been gone, and I have to restock. So hopefully you can do the same. Go to drinkolipop.com. Get 15% off your order by using the promo code JAYREELZ. That's right. Yours truly, JAYREELZ at checkout to get 15% off. And not only is this soda much better than all the others that are out there that you've come to grow and love that aren't good for you. A lot of sugar, high fructose corn syrups, all of the ingredients that you can't even pronounce. And if you can't pronounce it, they're not good for you. Here, I can read them off to you right now. Prebiotics, botanicals with plant fiber, with ingredients such as, of course, carbonated water. It is soda, people. But then they also have the vanilla, stevia leaf, a cassava root syrup, a banana flavor, all of that, banana puree. It's not flavor, people. Banana puree, all that and then some. It's non-GMO, much better than the regular sodas that you've been drinking, I'm sure, time in, time out, day in and day out. So one more time, use the promo code JAYREELZ at checkout. 15% off of your order at drinkolipop.com. So now, as we are in the middle of summer, and with August just days away, baseball right now is going to be the hot topic. As the trade deadline, we will have a 6 o'clock cap tomorrow, and that's PM, people. For those who are rooting for a team that has a playoff berth in sight, or maybe that they have a division lead and they're looking to pad with more reinforcements to their rosters. And I'll start there before I even get into any of the particulars regarding the division and wildcard races and get you caught up on that. We would think that over the course of the next 24 hours, there's still going to be some moving and shaking. The players that have been off the board, some have been surprising, some haven't. And the teams that have actually been active are the teams that either are leading in their divisions or certainly are in the hunt. Now, you have to wonder whether or not the teams that are kind of meddling, that although they may be a couple of games under 500, but may think to sell then buy, that being the Cincinnati Reds, that being the Chicago Cubs, maybe even the Texas Rangers when it's all said and done, although they're closer to the division than they are from the wild card. But you have those teams that, who knows, they may be able to pivot and say, to hell with it, let's just sell, see what we can get back. But it's the teams that have certainly been in contention, whether that's the Baltimore Orioles, who's made a few deals. They traded their outfielder Austin Hayes to the Philadelphia Phillies, and the Phillies have been active as well, which I'll get to in a second. But Baltimore, as they've hit the skids here, although they salvaged their series yesterday against the Padres, who the Padres had won 7 in a row going into the game yesterday. And for the Yankees, although they finally won a series, beating the Red Sox 2 out of 3, including the back 2, which I'll get to, and the Yankees also making a key move in their own regard. But for Baltimore, we know it's about them trying to win a division, maybe even get that cushion similar to last year when they won 101 games. What did that get them? Yes, I know, a sweep in the divisional series against the eventual world champion Texas Rangers. But with them bringing in guys like Siranthony Dominguez and Cristian Pache, which they shipped the former outfielder Austin Hayes to Philadelphia, and then they also traded for Zac Eflin, which to me, that's no big deal. Eflin's a guy who has had his moments. He has pitched well, whether it was with the Phillies or even with the Rays for that matter. And considering that Eflin is a guy that could eat up innings, little crafty, he's not going to overpower you, but I don't know if that's going to be a move that's good enough to bolster that rotation led by Corbin Burns as well as Grayson Rodriguez to be a guy who is a veteran, but I don't know if he's going to be reliable in a Game 3 start. Let's say if it is 1-1 or if you're down 0-2 again, where you're going to plug him in there and think that he's going to deliver you to a Game 4 at that point of a postseason series. So although the Orioles, you would think they're still going to try to see what they could do here over the course of the next 24 hours, but those are the big moves that they made. And to keep it in the division, the Yankees traded for Jazz Chisholm, the former Marlin, for 3 minor league prospects, including a big-time catcher. Now, I thought that was a good move for the Yankees, but I don't know if it's a good fit. Only because Chisholm is I'm not going to say he's a me guy, but he is a personality. He is, I would think, not a Yankee. And not to say the Yankee has to be all buttoned up and clean and prim and proper, which is what the George Steinbrenner Yankees were of yesteryear. And even though they still have that edict to where you can't have facial hair. Yes, you can have a mustache, but no beards, and you can't have hair past the collar of your shirt, or I guess the jersey for that matter in this case. And Chisholm is a guy that is flamboyant, has a lot of charisma, a lot of flair, which is good, but you have to wonder whether or not if he's more of a guy that is just going to be about himself and not about the team. Now, granted that he's coming from a last place team in the NL East to a pretty much first or second place, they're just separated by a game in the AL East, so I'm sure he's going to be on his P's and Q's, but who knows? If the ship that's been sinking a little bit for the Yankees, and not that it's going to sink all the way to the bottom of the ocean from the standpoint of them not making the postseason, but you have to wonder whether or not Chisholm is going to be a guy that's all in on this team, and if he's just going to be all about his performance as opposed to just the team itself. And as it is, it looks like he's going to be playing center field. A lot of people thought maybe he's going to be plugged in at second base, considering that Gleyber Torres, although has hit a little bit better as of late, but certainly has underachieved here over the last couple of years, and he's in a walk year, and it's almost like a pseudo-punishment for Torres if he doesn't wake up, considering they have Chisholm that could also play second base, although he's probably going to play center field where you'll have Judge in right and then Soto in left. So Chisholm, I thought, good move. They needed another left-handed bat, but again, is he a good fit? That we'll have to wait and see. Other moves, the Mets also trying to wheel and deal Ryne Stanek, the reliever formerly of the Astros, but they got him by way of Seattle. Did not do well in his debut yesterday, giving up 2 home runs. So, all right, let's shake out the cobwebs and make sure you got all the bad mojo or juju out of your system. And even though the game was pretty much over at that time, and of course I'll get into the Mets series with the Braves, which, good job by the Braves. They lost the first 2 games, and for them to come back and win the back 2 pretty much in dominating fashion, that was certainly a sign that the Braves told the Mets that, all right, you got those first 2 games, and even the 4th spot in the division, or I should say in the wild card standings, but they were able to bounce back nicely, and I'll get to the Met perspective on that later on. So you have Stanek, a guy that is going to be another body to come out of that bullpen. Yes, he has a little bit of pedigree, and hopefully that pedigree will translate into some good outings and maybe even great outings for him as the Mets try to just piece this bullpen together, especially with their starting rotation now back in shambles because of Kodai Senga, and I'll get to him later on as well. And then they also picked up Jesse Winker, which was a shock to me. A lot of the rumors had Michael Conforto coming back home from San Francisco as another outfielder, left-handed stick, to plug in there primarily, whether it's to spell Brandon Nimmo from time to time. And we all know about the situation regarding Starling Marte, where you could just plug that guy out in right field. Who knows if Marte's going to be returning anytime soon. But they bring in Winker instead, and Winker's a guy that's agitated the Met fan in the past, whether he's played for the Reds, even the Seattle Mariners, and was always a guy that was a thorn in the side as he tried to tease the fans from left field, and now he's a part of the Met team, so you wonder how the fans are going to open up or accept him, and I know that's going to be key. Not to say Winker is a guy that is going to have a press conference prior to his first game. You would think would be tonight, or at least he'll be in uniform for the Mets. If he wasn't in uniform yesterday, I know the trade was on Saturday, but maybe today will be his Met debut. So let's see how that goes, and let's see what else the Mets could do, because now with Kodai Senga, who pitched well on Friday night, got the win in his first outing of 2024, and what was that good for? 5 2/3 innings. He did give up a 2-run homer to Adam Duvall, but only 2 hits, 1 walk, which is good for Senga, and 9 strikeouts. But on a routine pop-up in the shallow part of the infield where Senga just tried to get away and Pete Alonso made the catch, but for whatever the reason, got his calf strained, and for whatever the reason, it looks like he's going to be on the shelf maybe for the rest of this year. Regular season, yes. Maybe postseason he can return, depending if the Mets do get there. But now you have to really scratch ahead, where Senga finally came all the way back from those shoulder injuries dating back to spring training. And on the heels of that performance where he was about to go 6 innings, and now he's going to be put on the shelf probably for the remainder of the year. So that was just a devastating blow. So you think the Mets are going to be, you would think that the Mets would look for another starter, not that they're going to look for a top of the rotation guy, but maybe a guy that's going to give you innings, a guy that is reputable, maybe a guy that has a little bit of pedigree. So we'll have to wait and see there on what the Mets do. And then you had the Phillies, who, talking about Austin Hayes, that deal with the Orioles for the 2 top leading division in the AL and NL East, as they make a trade. Well, now the Phillies also traded for Carlos Estevez, the closer for the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, and it came at a pretty big price, considering that Estevez is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. So he is a rental, and they traded 2 of their top pitching prospects to LA. And of course, we all know that the Angels need pitching in the worst way. So they figure, hey, let's see what we could get back for our closer. And they got more than I'm sure than what they ever even bargained for. So that's a good deal for the Angels. Let's see how those pitchers will pan out. But I thought maybe that was a lot, considering that he had just 2+ months left on his contract, as he's going to be a free agent come the end of the World Series. But the Phillies, we all know, they have to go all in this year, considering they went to a World Series 2 years ago, and then last year was 1 game short when they lost the back 2 at home to the Arizona Diamondbacks, as everybody knows, for a chance to advance to the World Series, which they did not do. And then the Cubs made a trade with the Rays, which I thought was pretty interesting, because the Rays have now played pretty well, and they've gotten themselves into the wild card mix. So they traded Isaac Paredes, who has shown he's had a good bat, for Christopher Morel, who also has a pretty good stick. So 2 guys that I guess maybe needed a change of scenery. And the Rays, we understand, they make some very shrewd deals. And this is one, certainly, that is right down that alley. And in the process, they also get back a couple of pitchers in the deal. So who knows if those pitchers are going to be major league ready, if that's maybe for next year or somewhere down the road. But they traded Morel, or traded for Morel, and then Paredes goes to Chicago. So a team that could be in the mix for the wild card. And as for the Cubs, who knows? They may be out to sea before it's all said and done, although they're 5 back, and we'll go through the standings there in a minute. So now that leaves you with a little more than 24 hours left. Who's left now in order for this rumor mill to see who's going to be shipped to a new location? The first guy that comes to mind, of course, is Garrett Crochet, the lefty from the White Sox, who had been mostly a reliever, but now as a starter has pitched more innings than he has in his major league career. And for Crochet, I don't know if this was just strictly him, or maybe his representation probably said, hey, let's put the word out that if you do get traded here, that we want a new deal. And here's a guy that's pulling an NBA player empowerment move. Now, Crochet, we get it. Live arm, left-handed, those guys don't grow on trees. But considering he doesn't really have a resume when it comes to him being a starter, and I get it's a little bit risky, but they figured that, hey, we're going to go all in, all the chips to the middle of the table. And for that team that's going to acquire Crochet, I'm sure they're going to have to come up with a pretty handsome price. Now, I would think $200 million or anything like that is probably going to be too rich for any team's blood, even if they have a ton of money. But I would think, hey, if you give them a reasonable contract, and I believe he'd be a free agent after the 2026 year. So even if you gave him something along the lines of 5 years, maybe $90 million, considering that he's just getting his feet wet as a starter, and for him to now try to go all in to say, yes, we want in upwards of 150 to well over $200 million, I think they'd have to pump the brakes. They could ask for that, but I don't know if they deserve that just yet. But who am I to say? This is just from someone observing from afar and thinking that because Crochet doesn't have a lot of experience as a starter, and granted he has a live arm, but wear and tear and delivery, it's not as if he's going in one inning and just going balls to the wall. He has to preserve that arm over the course of 5, 6, maybe even 7 innings. And if he wants the big time money, and we get it that the starters do get that type of money, but because he doesn't have a ton of starts, only pretty much this season, you could say that for him. Well, I don't know if that's going to translate to getting the top dollar that a lot of these other pitchers who have a lot of length, a lot of years, service, production, etc., will be able to get or be able to rival with those guys. So he would probably have to take a lesser deal. Then you also have another starter that's out there, and Tarek Skubal, who's an all-star this year, Detroit Tigers. And who knows, with him having another year and a half worth of service, he's not going to be a free agent until after next year as well. You would think a team that is looking to try to get themselves into the postseason or lock their division or really try to go for it here this year, that's going to be a hefty price tag, similar to what the Angels got for what the Phillies got for Carlos Estevez and getting those two prospects. So for Skubal, who's had a killer year, maybe even in the running for a Cy Young, and what team is going to go out and try to pluck that pitcher from Detroit in order for them to be a part of a pennant race, wild card chase, etc.? So that's going to be another guy that we're going to have our eyes on. And then the third guy, and these are all pitchers, by the way, the closer of the A's, Mason Miller. Now, he's another guy that has a couple of years left before he becomes a free agent. Live arm, big-time fastball, and for any team that's going to get him, he's currently on the IL with a fractured pinky. Now, that's his non-throwing hand, so you don't have to worry about whether or not he's going to be able to be 100%, especially if it was a situation where it was going to affect him on his right hand, which is his throwing hand. But considering it's the left, and who knows what his prognosis as far as when he's going to be coming back. But you would think that even if a team that is willing to pay the price to get Miller onto their ball club, that even if he's not going to come back to the middle of August, you would still maybe take the chance of not only just this year, but maybe even next year, considering you still have another year before he becomes a free agent, and therefore he may be worth the risk. So you have that to look forward to as far as the pitchers go. Now, other than that, as far as hitters or sluggers or anything like that, I don't think you're going to see some big-time names fly around here, because although the rumors maybe of a month and change ago, whether your name is Pete Alonso or even JD Martinez for that matter, or who knows, if Cody Bellinger, that's a guy that could be on somebody's radar when it's all said and done, a left-handed bat, although he's regressed this year in Chicago, unlike last year. But those are some of the names, or at least Bellinger in this case, could be a guy that could be jettisoned between now and 6 p.m. tomorrow. And you would think for a team off the top of my head, will he go to, let's say, Texas, who, for whatever the reason, their offense has gone south this year? I don't think Texas will probably be in the mix for a guy like that. But you do have to look at teams that are trying to lengthen their lineup, to try to get themselves in position, as I mentioned before, to stay in these pennant chases and playoff races, because with 2+ months to go, you're going to have to do whatever it takes to try to get to October. And as we all know, it's a crapshoot from that point on, considering what we've seen in the last couple of years with teams winning 104, 105 games, winning a division by double digits. And then what happens? They get either swept or lose in the first round, and all of that regular season success goes right out the window. So we will see what's going to happen. You know, to keep yourself attuned and abreast of what's going on, go to my YouTube channel, at JAYREELZ. I'll cover whatever trades that come down the pike between now and tomorrow night and give you a little bit of analysis in my 1-minute short. So between now and Thursday's podcast, if you want to really know what JAYREELZ has to say or what I think about a particular deal, go to the channel. You'll get all of my info and analysis on that. So please stay tuned to that and subscribe on top of that as well, which I would sincerely appreciate. Now, as far as the weekend and what had transpired, I know we could probably start with the New York teams just to kind of get it out the way. I know the Mets talking about the Braves and the good job that they did. Now, the Mets did a bad job because they got a big win there on Thursday night. This is coming on the heels of sweeping the Yankees and pounding them into submission. So for the Mets to win the game on Thursday night based on, what was it, Ramon Laureano missing that ball in right field where Jeff McNeil, the body language, just trying to make sure it stood fair and getting the winning run across in extra innings. And then on Friday night, we talked about Senga and how his start, as great as it was, certainly was bittersweet because of the injury. But for the Mets to have that 7-run third inning with all the home runs, Mark Vientos, the grand slam from JD Martinez, and Francisco Alvarez tacking on another home run, you would have thought that the Mets just need to get one more win out of the weekend in order for it to stick, for them to be in the 4th seed, having the home field advantage. Now, of course, you still have another 2.5 months to go, but having the 4 in the National League is big because that means you will host in the wild card round. But the Braves then on Saturday blanked the Mets 4-0, and then on yesterday, Sunday, got out of the gate real sluggish. They were down before you know it 7-0, and then the Mets ended up losing 9-2 to split that 4-game series, and now are a game and a half back, where they made it to 2 games and were just a half game ahead, and now they're a game and a half back, just pretty much what you saw there from the start of the weekend, or really from Thursday. So now everything is status quo. So that's what you have there with the Mets as the Twins coming to town. So you think the Twins, that should be pretty interesting because the Twins have also played pretty well in their own right. And of course, I'll get to the American League races in a second. But then the Yankees won 2 out of 3, and after just a brutal loss on Friday, where they were up 7-4 in the 8th, they gave up 2 runs, or 7-4 in the 7th, they gave up 2 runs in the 7th and then 3 in the 8th before losing 9-7. And just when you thought it was going to be worse and thought that maybe this Yankee season could go off the rails, Saturday night's game, they were down 8-6 in the 8th inning, so they score a run in the 8th and a run in the 9th to tie, and then they get the 3 in the extras in the 10th to win 11-8, and maybe that's what they needed to get some wind in their sails, because then last night they pretty much played from in front, and the Yankees, although the Red Sox threatened there a little bit, but the Yankees pulled away there late. Jazz Chisholm, as I mentioned earlier in the trade, went 1 for 5, got a hit, stole a base, and a run late. So the Yankees win a series and now go to Philadelphia, and let's see if they can build off of that, because the Phillies for 3 games, that should be a packed ballpark for the next 3 days, and it will probably feel like a World Series atmosphere, or at least a playoff atmosphere. So let's see if the Yankees could piggyback off of their back-to wins in Fenway to now go to Citizens Bank and see if they can win a series before coming home this weekend. So big series win for the Yankees. And with the Orioles, as I mentioned, they did win yesterday. I know there was a little bit of controversy at the end where the double play ball that the manager, Brandon Hyde, thought that the game was going to be over because there was interference there on that double play. But as you saw in the replay, Gunnar Henderson was not interfered. Hyde gets ejected, but the Orioles do hang on to win and avoid a sweep there by the Padres. And it's interesting because with the Yankees not playing well, the Orioles have pretty much been the same. They lost 2 out of 3 in Miami. They lost 2 out of 3 to San Diego, but they're still a game ahead in the AL East and by percentage points, because the Orioles have, I believe, 2 games in hand on the Yankees, so that bodes well for them, at least in the moment. But the Orioles are now going through a stretch here where they have not played well, and this is a team that, remember, up until now, postseason notwithstanding, because we talked about how they got swept by the Texas Rangers last year in October, but it wasn't until, I believe, in the middle part of May where they hadn't been swept in a series in forever, and now they've been swept a couple of times and have lost series here as of late. Remember, before the All-Star break, they lost 2 out of 3 to the Yankees, and even though they came out of the break winning 2 out of 3 in Texas, but then they lose in Miami, and they had to get out of Miami alive because on Thursday, me being down there, and of course, before the game started, the podcast was already in the can. So they had to survive a game where they were up 6-0, and they actually went into extras before they won 7-6 down in Lone Depot Park. So for the Orioles, let's see if they can turn it around, and we'll go through the schedule there in a minute when we keep you up to date with what's happening in baseball in the early part of this week. Now, as far as the AL Central, the Guardians lost 2 out of 3 in Philadelphia. Or I should say they won 2 out of 3 in Philadelphia, so kudos to them. Big series win for them. And then you had the Twins, who have also played well. I mentioned that they're going to be here at Citi Field for the next 3 days. So that should be pretty interesting series for those two teams, as you have AL versus NL, as we know, as I pull up my schedule here. So for the Guardians, as they continue to try to keep themselves at least more of an arm's length in the division over the Minnesota Twins. But for right now, they are currently 4.5, 5 in the loss. Let me make sure that. No, 4 in the loss, but 4.5 back. So that's something to keep of note. And then the Royals, who had lost the back 2 of this recent series, where I believe they were on the road, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they were in Wrigley and they lost 2 out of 3. Oh, no, that was at home. Excuse me, my apologies. When they lost to the Cubs. But even though the Royals are fine in the wild card picture as of right now, slimmest of margins, but I'll get to that in a second. And in Seattle, we talked about this the other day. They certainly made amends for their bad play by sweeping the White Sox in Chicago, but they have not gotten back into first place. They pretty much kept pace with the Astros, who are 1 game ahead of them. In fact, by 1 percentage point, because the Astros are 55-50, Mariners are 56-51, so they do have 2 games in hand, the Astros, so you have to keep that in mind moving forward. And then the Rangers, what can you say about them? I don't know if they're going to click this year or not. But Texas, even though they are right now just 4.5 games back and 5 in the loss behind the Astros, but how can they lose a series to the Blue Jays? I get it, they were in Toronto, but Toronto has had just a lost season, and you have to wonder. Let me throw in those 2 players, Bo Bichette or even Vladimir Guerrero. Now, I don't think those guys are going to be moved here because those are blockbuster type figures. More so Guerrero than Bichette, but stranger things have happened, so we'll have to wait and see there. But for the Rangers to go into Toronto and get swept there, it makes you wonder whether or not, and even with Houston, although they got themselves back in the first place, and even with their success here over the last 6-7 years, but I don't know if they're going to be trusted here with a new manager and if they're going to be a team that's going to go on that big type of run. I don't know. That remains to be seen. So that's what you have there with the AL West and Seattle. Let's see what they're going to do if they try to get any reinforcements. And there's a guy that I actually missed out here when I talked about a lot of these trades. They did get Randy Arozarena from the Tampa Bay Rays, and that's a big step for them, but I still think they need another stick in that lineup. Whether they do that, I don't know if they're going to be able to. They should be able to because they have money, but will they pull the trigger on bringing in another bat, which they desperately need? I don't know. I don't trust Seattle in that regard. Yes, they could trade for pitchers a la Luis Castillo 2 years ago, but if they're going to get a big-time stick, let's just say, Vladimir Guerrero, will they do that? I don't know. I'd have to believe it when I see it, so that's another name we could throw out there, especially for a Seattle team that's just trying to get themselves back on the beam to be in contention out in the AL West. Now, we know about the Phillies. They're going to cruise to a division title. Braves, Mets, we talked about them. Brewers currently have a 6-game lead in the division over the Cardinals, and you have to wonder if the Cardinals are going to make a deal here. They've been quiet leading up to today as far as making any type of transactions. And then the Padres, who have played well, won 7 in a row, like I mentioned, but they did lose that final game in Baltimore. But with the Dodgers, now I can't believe I'm even going to bring this up. Now they're 7 in the loss, but 6.5 back. I still think the Dodgers are going to be fine. They're going to get healthy at some point. Now Clayton Kershaw back in the rotation. He did only pitch 4 innings, got 6 strikeouts, but that's pretty much a tune-up for a guy that we all know pretty much took the first half off just to rehab. You're not going to put any more mileage on that arm if you don't have to. So you figure you bring him here late July. It's almost like having a trade, but with Kershaw, we all know it's about October. And yes, he could put up some good numbers here in the regular season, maybe not Kershaw-esque from the early to middle part of his career than what he's done in the regular season, but we all know October, he has been mediocre. And we could just go back to last year in the first game against the Diamondbacks. He didn't even make it out of the first inning. So that's Kershaw for you. I don't want to hear he's an old man. No, if Kershaw had a good regular season, and now he's all pumped up for game 1 against the D-backs, and he can't even get 3 outs to get into a dugout? Come on. What does that tell you about Kershaw, especially when it comes to when the games and the money's on the line? So that's what we have there with the divisions. Now, as far as the wild card, real quick, before I pivot. Wild card right now in the AL, you have the Yankees, who are 4.5 games ahead of the Royals, who have the last spot, the 6th seed in the AL. Sandwiched in between are the Twins. Twins are currently just 1 in the loss behind the Yankees, but 2.5 back because of the disparity of games played. The Twins have 3 games in hand on the Yankees. That's the reason why. Then you have the Royals, who just are a game ahead of the Red Sox, a game and a half ahead of the Mariners, 3 ahead of the Tampa Bay Rays. I'm going to leave it there only because the Tigers, yes, 5.5, but they're 3 games on the 500. And then the Rangers, who are 6 back, but they are 4 games on the 500. So I'm not going to include those 2 teams. So you're going to have, right now as we speak, 4 teams. I'll leave the Twins out for now, but 4 teams for the 1 spot, and that's the 6th seed in the AL. Kansas City, Boston, Seattle, and Tampa. And then in the National League, you have the Braves, who are just a game over the Padres in the wild card race. You have the Mets, who are a half game behind the Padres. And then you have, and that's for the 6th and final seed in the NL. Then you have the D-backs, a half game behind the Mets. Cardinals, a game back behind the Mets. Pirates, 2 games. San Francisco, 3.5. San Francisco's 2 games on the 500. And then you have the Cubs and Reds, who are both 5 under, but the Cubs and Reds are respectively 5 games back, or I should say 5 games under 500. So I don't know if I'm going to take them seriously at the moment. I get it, 5 games back. It's not insurmountable. But can we get to 500 at first before we can even consider them a possible wild card team in contention? And the Giants have actually played well a little bit, so you wonder if they're going to make a move. Now, they swept the Rockies, no big whoop, 4 games at home. So you figure, all right, well, that's what they should do, especially if they're a mediocre team going up against a really bad team. And they're going to play the A's upcoming here. So you would think, and I believe they're going to play at home as I take a look at the schedule here for the early part of this week. Now, the A's, I think that's only going to be 2 games, if I'm not mistaken. Let's just double check that, please. The Giants will have the A's here for tonight, and I believe it's at home. Or maybe that's going to be tomorrow. Let's pull that up. Yes, you have for the 30th. Why isn't this coming up? Yes. Oakland at San Francisco. So that's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday. They're not going to play tonight. So that is your schedule there for San Francisco. But let's see what we have for the rest. Toronto and Baltimore, they're actually playing a doubleheader. So the Orioles, they are going to make up one of those games against the Yankees with those games in hand. We talked about Yankees-Philly. That's a big series there, as we know. Mets and Twins, below that. That's more of a 3.5, 4-star matchup. Seattle and Boston, there you go. That's a big series, especially for those teams battling it out for the wild card. Kansas City's playing at the White Sox, so you figured they would fatten their stats against them. Pittsburgh at Houston as Pittsburgh tries to hang in that race. And that's for today. Let's see what we got for tomorrow. Atlanta, Milwaukee. I believe they're playing tonight, aren't they? Did I overlook that? Yes, Atlanta, Milwaukee. So that's a decent series there with the Brewers in first place. Texas at St. Louis. You have some good series to at least look forward to. Mainly New York, Philadelphia, Seattle, Boston, Minnesota, and the Mets. Toronto, Baltimore, only because Baltimore, the battle there in the AL East. Texas, St. Louis, rematch of 2011, if you want to go back that far. World Series, that is. Pittsburgh, Houston, Dodgers, and Padres. All right, I overlooked that, so my apologies there. And I believe that'll be a 3-gamer, considering they're going to start their series tomorrow night down in San Diego. So if the Padres, who have been playing hot baseball, even with the loss yesterday, if they want to sweep here and even think about being in contention for the NL West, they have to win 3 games. If they win 2 out of 3, they gain 1 game in the standings. All right, big whoop, but let's see what they do here as we move it along in this baseball season. Now, before I move on, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. I know Dylan Cease threw a no-hitter there, speaking of the Padres, in Washington. 2nd no-hitter in franchise history. Now, think about it. Joe Musgrove, I believe, threw the first one, what was it, early 2022? So they went 53 years without throwing a no-hitter, and now they've thrown their 2nd no-hitter in the past 3 years, or 3 seasons. So kudos to Dylan Cease for throwing a no-hitter. Then we also give another congratulations to a one Max Scherzer who passed Justin Verlander on the all-time strikeout list at 3,400, 10th most in Major League history. And Scherzer, who's pitched pretty decently since his return. So let's see if Scherzer could be a guy sent packing here. You never know. Wouldn't be surprised if that happens as the mercenary that he is. So that's what we have there with baseball. As let me move it along here. And I'll get to the NFL right now as I throw on my helmet and shoulder pads. And as I mentioned at the top, I'm sure there's a lot of parents out there that are probably thinking, if they have an athlete, and in particular, let's say they have a quarterback, start grooming them. Because even if you're a good quarterback, not great, good, that kid is going to get paid. And this isn't to knock the two players that I'm about to bring up. This is more of the landscape with the market and what the quarterback makes. And I talked about this last week in reference to Jordan Love. Jordan Love is a guy that was drafted a few years ago. We all know his story. Sat on the bench, Aaron Rodgers, and then of course we all know Aaron Rodgers wanted out, gets traded to the Jets. Jordan Love is your starting quarterback last year. Led him to the playoffs and had a big playoff win in Dallas before losing in San Francisco where he was awful in the fourth quarter. So now he comes into camp thinking that I'm not going to practice, I'm not going to play in any preseason games, I want an extension. And even though the GM, Brian Gutekunst, he even agreed and said, hey, I can understand why, considering he's going into the last year, I believe, of his deal, his rookie deal, and that he's going to get extended. And my thing is that because he only has 1 year of full-time service under his belt being a starting quarterback, was he going to get the top flight pay in the sport? I thought maybe they would give him something along the lines of $45 million a year, 4-year contract where it was going to be about 180, or let's say it was just shy of 200 million, where you thought, all right, we understand. This is what the going rate is for a quarterback. But to think, he ended up getting 4 years, 220 million, $55 million a year, which is the top level salary equivalent to Joe Burrow and the newly minted and extended Trevor Lawrence. Now we could say Burrow, okay, fine. He's been to 2 conference title games. He's been to a Super Bowl. Understand injuries interrupted that last year. But Burrow, you would think, okay, fine. He's worth that. Trevor Lawrence, that remains to be seen. But Lawrence won a playoff game similar to what Jordan Love did this past year, 2 years ago. And, of course, fell flat on his face last year when they had a chance to go to the postseason and had, I believe, an 8-5 record. And it went whoop, right into the toilet. But for the Packers to push all of those big bucks into the direct deposit, the bank account of Jordan Love, I thought it was a little bit too much, I have to admit. And right, who am I to say that? But again, you're talking about a guy who just has 1 year as a full-time starter. And yes, you think he's going to get better, you think he's going to progress. I understand all that, 100%. But I thought it was a little risky to be in the pantheon. He's making more a year than some of the guys that recently have signed long-term deals. Whether your name is Lamar Jackson, who's a 2-time MVP. Whether your name is, I understand he's been in the league a long time, Matthew Stafford. Or even a guy like Justin Herbert making more annually than him. And yes, I get it. Love has won one more playoff game and has played in twice the many playoff games than Justin Herbert has. Understood. But for him to get $55 million, I thought was just a little bit too much. But one more time, the market is going to dictate that. And then the same for Tua Tagovailoa, who got a 4-year, $212 million extension. And Tua, you got to wonder about his health. That's the big question mark. And last year, we get it. He played every game. He was fine. Everything was kudos to him. Of course, the year before, he had all those concussions and a lot of speculation about the length of his career because he's such a small guy. He's not 6'6", 260, a la Dante Culpepper. Look him up if you don't know who he is. So for Tua, he got his money, and yes, another going rate scenario. Now, does Tua really deserve? I don't want to say deserve, that's too strong. For Tagovailoa, and I know I'm bad with these names here, for him to get that much, and I can see if he got somewhere between 45 and 50, but over 50, and I'm not trying to be cynical here, people. I don't know. It's just me. I get it that these players are going to get their money. I get it that these players are just all about their craft. And we understand there's a shelf life with NFL players. You could say for all athletes, but even more so for the NFL player. And to me, it's not even about how much money they get. It's just about their performance. And it's weird because this is in any sport. If you play well above your contract, you're going to get paid for what you did in the past. And generally, the second leg of that contract, for the most part, doesn't really work out. Where in this case with the NFL, Tagovailoa only has a year, and last year was very good. I get it. But with the concussions and everything, big question mark. And we understand quarterbacks don't grow on trees. And then with Love, has the 1 year, and it's like, all right, we want to see more. So you're not paying him for a past performance. It's not as if he had an all-pro year. Granted, he took his team to the postseason and everything that I detailed. But still, a ton of money that he got, considering the amount of experience that he has under center. And that's my argument. So it's not about the money, people. It's not about, they don't deserve it, anything. No. They get it. They're agents. The market, understood. But for me, a little bit too much. At least Burrow had a track record. At least some of these guys. And I understand a lot of these guys didn't have a track record. Lamar Jackson got his money last year, and what happened? He parlayed that to an MVP season. So at least you can look at that and say he earned his keep. So, and he won an MVP prior to that. That's just my point. Let me just digress and go from there. Now, other than that, you've had a couple of injuries here. I know Sam Williams of the Cowboys looks like ACL, defensive lineman. He's going to be done for the year, so that's a blow for the Cowboys as they try to see what they could do to try to get themselves back with another person there that could fill in his shoes. And then you had the Rams also lose out on their corner, Darian Kendrick, who may be also done with an ACL. I believe it's official by now, but they do have Tre'Davious White as well as Darius Williams that they did get and pick up from the offseason as free agents. So at least they have some depth there, but with Kendrick out, that certainly is a blow to their secondary. And then the Lions re-up with Taylor Decker, their offensive lineman, extension there, 3 years, $60 million, as the Lions look to try to build off of last year's successful regular season, postseason coming this short from making their first Super Bowl. So that's what you have there with the NFL. Now, let me turn my attention real quick to the NBA as I lace up the high tops and talk about what's going on there. And it's more of an off-the-court issue. I talked about this on Thursday or even before that with the NBA mega deal with the media, how TNT now looks like they're going to go all out here to try to get themselves back into this deal that was 11 years, $76 billion. And as of right this second, ESPN, ABC, as we know, NBC is a part of it, and Amazon Prime. And the reason why Amazon Prime was one of the big pillars of this new deal is because Adam Silver felt that the reach of Amazon throughout the world globally and the digital opportunities that Prime has aligned with the interest of the NBA superseded anything that TNT could do. And even though that's Time Warner and Warner Brothers. So it's not as if there's some small mom and pop shop by any stretch, but they figured that Amazon, with the prowess that they have worldwide, that it was more feasible for the NBA to go in that direction. And what did TNT or Warner Brothers, and what did they have to say about it? They came out and said that they were grossly misinterpreted from their contractual rights and that they've matched Amazon's offer, and they feel that the NBA cannot even reject that considering that they matched it. Now, who knows? He said, she said. Is it Silver saying that's not the case? Is it TNT saying, we came to the table and we re-upped with that same deal that I guess Amazon Prime, and I don't even know what their deal was off the top of my head, but they're going to take appropriate action, meaning that they're going to take this to court. And who knows if this is going to be a 15-round heavyweight slug-it-out contest for TNT to get back into the business with the NBA and broadcast their games on the network. And even Charles Barkley, who, as we all know, a big-time figure on TNT with the Inside the NBA show, was even quoted that the NBA, he felt that they wanted to break up with us from the beginning. and that TNT didn't even have a chance. So maybe whatever that he heard, rumblings from the outside, or maybe even from the inside internally, that maybe they felt that this deal wasn't going to be dotted I's and crossed T's when it was all said and done. And we know Barkley, he's very outspoken, and he's a guy that's not shy to a microphone. So who knows? I don't know what's going to come out of this. Is this going to be a thing where TNT is going to fight their way back in or whatever? I just thought to throw that out there for those curious. I think TNT will do their best, but I don't know. If this has already been signed, sealed, and delivered, what more can TNT do? So that's what I have from that scenario in regards to the new media deal with the NBA. And then there was one move as I lace up my skates and go on the ice. One move, the Flyers, they extended one of their players, Travis Konecny, 8 years, $70 million. That was a huge deal. They had to sign him. No surprise there. So it's not as if he went to another team. Flyers was trying to, as we know, rebuild, try to get themselves back. Obviously, the Flyers have had some tough times here. Yes, they made it to the playoffs here over the last 4 or 5 years. Not this past season and even the season prior to that. And the Flyers, we all know, they're a big-time brand in the NHL, dating back to the Broad Street Bullies of the 70s and all the success they had then. And even with the years after that, even into the 80s, had some success there. Made a cup there in 2010, as recent as that. And I understand that's 14 years ago, but as they try to get themselves back to relevancy in the National Hockey League. But that's all I have there with the NHL. And then now let me turn my attention to the Olympics, because there's some interesting takeaways that I have here that not only from the weekend, but also leading up into the week, etc. First off, Simone Biles. I know she's dealing with a leg injury. How huge is that going to be when it comes to her winning golds? We'll have to wait and see. But that's something you have to keep in the back of her mind when you watch her on the grand stage, when you watch her perform. And let's see if that's going to compromise her as far as her getting those 10s, as far as her getting those top marks from the judges, and for her to capture the gold yet again here in Paris. Or there in Paris. Obviously, I'm here in New York. So that's one thing you certainly have to keep in mind. The other thing is, and this is a much lesser scale, but because of the heavyweight matchup that we're talking about, and they could be playing right now as I'm speaking, Rafael Nadal versus Novak Djokovic in Roland Garros, which is Nadal's domain. The champs that are now long in the tooth, more so Nadal than Djokovic, because we saw Djokovic at least go to a Wimbledon final. But both guys, with Djokovic 37 and Nadal 38, this is a clash that I know a lot of people may not be wrapped up in, but because they are who they are. And not that this is for a gold medal, this is just to advance. But I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen between the two. And I don't even know. I'd have to, let me see if I could see if they're currently playing. I don't know if that's going to be a primetime thing. And obviously, you're going to have to talk about the time difference. So right now, what is it? Oh, they're what, 5 hours ahead off the top of my head? So it's what, 4 o'clock there? So I don't know if that means they're going to be playing primetime in Paris, which would be sometime in the afternoon here. So that's another story that I want to see how they both fare when they face one another at some point today. Then you have the USA basketball team beating Serbia. No surprise there. They blew them out by 26 points. I know Steve Kerr felt like an idiot, that's his quote, by not inserting Jayson Tatum at all in the game there yesterday. And to me, that's no big whoop. Does it come as a bit of a surprise that Tatum didn't even get a minute? Yes, but is that something that I'm going to go crazy about? Like, oh, how come Jayson Tatum is not playing? Please, I'd rather him not play. Let him just take off, get a goal, and come back home, because he just went through the rigors of an NBA playoff. Granted, I get it was 5+ weeks ago, but I'd rather have him just take a load off instead of being in a contested, hotly just back and forth with competition and stressful minutes. And not to say that they're going to probably have a ton of stressful minutes throughout the course of this Olympiad, but for Tatum to sit out for a game, I'm not going to sweat it. So let Kerr talk about, now watch, Kerr put him in for 30 minutes, which I understand that'd be a lot, but so that's what's happening with the U.S. team. And that's not, to me, let's see as we get deeper, because one game against Serbia, and I know Nikola Jokic, but pump the brakes. I'm not going to get geeked up over that. But the other storyline that I'm fascinated by is Victor Wembanyama, the NBA Rookie of the Year this past season, playing on his home turf, had 19 points, 9 rebounds, 4 steals, and 3 blocks against Brazil. So you have to wonder whether or not, now granted, are they going to be going as far as maybe a bronze, silver, dare I even say, the gold medal game, which obviously they get a silver if they lose to whomever that would be, and we would think it'd be the U.S. But Wembanyama's presence, and not only that, just being on that soil, where he's from, and how far could that go for Wembanyama to try to get any medal, but in particular the gold, I think that's fascinating. Because if this is Wembanyama anywhere else, would it be a story to see how he would play on the stage? Yeah, maybe. But because it's in his backyard, because the city and the entire country is going to be behind him, and you know that they're going to be just over the moon if Wembanyama takes this France team as far as they could possibly go. Now, as we've seen, the fans have really been active because they booed Joel Embiid, not only during the introductions, him touching the ball, him getting in the game, because Embiid actually had an opportunity to be a part of the France team because he does have natural citizenship from what I read, which he got 2 years ago, and could have actually played for the France team, although he's from Cameroon. And the reason why he's not playing for the Cameroon team because they didn't qualify for these summer games, but he chose the U.S. Embiid because of his son being born in the U.S., and he also got his passport and citizenship 2 years ago as well. So I guess he felt more obligated, or maybe his allegiance was more to the U.S. considering he had a son born here on this soil, and I guess just his connection with the U.S. was a lot more stronger than France. So if France is already on the Wemby, I don't want to say bandwagon, but they're on the Wemby train, hopefully on the express track to a gold medal game appearance, and already booing Embiid the way they have, and who knows when U.S. and France will clash. I don't know what the bracket is or what the schedule is if U.S. and France will play before, let's say, a scenario where it's for a gold medal, or even, let's say, for a bronze if both teams do not qualify for the championship game. So that's going to be a fascinating story. So I don't want to hear anybody else. Come on, JAYREELZ. Let's talk about Sha'Carri Richardson. And, yeah, we talked about that on Thursday prior to the start of the Olympics. But this is just what I've gathered here over the weekend and into the early part of the week between Djokovic, Nadal, Simone Biles and her leg. That's going to be a question mark moving forward. And then USA's performance with Kerr's comments about Tatum, as well as the natives with Wemby carrying the French team on his back, and then, of course, booing Embiid and their passion for their team, and, of course, the players that didn't jump on board for Team France. To me, that's a story. So that's what you have with the Olympics. As I'm moving along, I know there was an MMA bout Saturday night, and for those who are curious, my apologies. After I got back from Florida there on Friday afternoon, I landed LaGuardia Airport about 2:45. It was just a rat race from that point on until Saturday night when I got back, right about 11 o'clock p.m. So therefore, I was exhausted. I was tired. I knew there was a bout. Off the top of my head, I couldn't even tell you. And I know you're going to say, JAYREELZ, that's a bad job on your part. Come on. You're trying to get into MMA. You're trying to at least keep us apprised and get us, take the finger of the pulse, on the pulse of what's going on. My apologies. And you know me, I'm all about transparency. I'm all about accountability. I know you had to fight that night, and I'm sure it may not have been a huge fight as far as maybe some household names or guys that are going to just light up the marquee. So therefore, because of that, now I knew if it was supposed to be an epic bout, I would have been more in tune to that, where I would have read more up on it or watched the highlights or whatever, but I didn't do any of that. So my apologies there. As you well know, for the next big fight or next big UFC, I'll be on top of that. And then to recap, let me segue my crazy Friday and even the trip overall, as I'm back in my home office, as you see from behind me, if you're watching on YouTube. And then on top of that, my 3 prior podcasts, 2 of them were in Kissimmee, Florida, where I had the palm trees. And even though I had the morning dew last Monday's podcast, if you want to go back and watch, I understand it's sports news where a lot of it is perishable and it's, of course, an afterthought at this point. But if you want to just take a look, please do so one more time on YouTube at JAYREELZ. But from last Monday on, I've been nursing a foot injury, which I'm going to go get checked out tomorrow. And I hurt it while running, which for those who do or do not know, I love to run. It's one of my passions. I love to just get out there, even in a city I'm not familiar with or a town or area. I just love to run. That's how I keep my cardio up. That's how I do my best to stay in shape. And I set out a personal challenge to run 8 straight days from the time I landed, or the day after, I should say, from the Thursday to the last Thursday. Those 8 days, I was going to run at least 5K, 3.1 miles every day. And on the second day, almost a mile and a half in, turned my ankle, sprained my foot so bad that I still have a noticeable limp. Something may be broken in there. I don't know. I'm going to get it checked out tomorrow, and that's going to be part of a vlog. So you've been warned. I'm already in the process of editing it, and come Thursday's podcast, I'll let you know when it's going to be put up on my YouTube channel one more time at JAYREELZ as I detail a 3-parter. 2 parts in Florida and the 1 part in New York when I go get my foot checked and my overall health. So you definitely want to stay tuned to that. So go ahead, subscribe, people. Don't waste any more time. At the end of this podcast, go subscribe on my YouTube channel. Do so. But the rest of my trip in Florida, I had a wonderful time. I reacquainted myself with South Beach, which obviously holds a place near and dear to my heart. And good, bad, and different. You'll see that on the vlog. I reconnected with my brother, who I hadn't seen since my wedding, October 2021. Spent a short time with him, just an afternoon, but it was great to see him, great to spend some time. I actually missed that guy, as well as my son and my grandkids, which I talked about a little bit last week. That was the first part of my trip. The second part of my trip was in Miami, where I got to see Mets Marlins last Monday night, which was a treat. That's also a part of the vlog. I'll also talk about the back end, which was a little bit bittersweet for yours truly, because I got back to New York and I felt a little empty, and it was just almost a little surreal. It was in my feelings. It was just kind of bizarre. And I don't know, maybe I didn't want to leave Miami just yet. I didn't want to come back to New York. And even though I'm back in the New York groove, people, I got over that, said a prayer, did a little just overall self-exploration just to kind of get past that, which is always important. We all need that every now and again to kind of look from within just to see where we're at and what's going on and what's happening and just try to get our bearings and equilibrium back. So when I did that Saturday morning, I felt a little bit better. And now I am about to do a full court press, not only with just myself, yours truly, but with the podcast and everything else, as I got a lot cooking here. So that was pretty much my Florida trip. I enjoyed it. And yes, a little bittersweet at the end, but you'll get a full view of that on the vlog, which you'll have to stay tuned, maybe to the podcast, but also to the channel as to when that'll come up. And with that being said, people, another podcast just about the books. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. And if you haven't done so, just like I mentioned at the top, subscribe, rate, review, Apple, Spotify, which I'm going to incorporate Spotify video through that platform. I'm going to try to do that with this one that I'm recording as I speak, because I'm trying to expand, people. I'm trying to make this and make myself, this podcast, yours truly, to be a household name. Full-time content creator. This is what I'm doing. This is my livelihood. Trying to earn some money in this space. So please, your support is tremendous. So tell your family, friends, foes, frenemies, tell them all about this podcast, about yours truly, about the channel, etc. If you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, of course, YouTube, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, obviously JAYREELZ on YouTube, Twitter, X, JAYREELZ1, just a number, the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com, where I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. Talking sports, in the blood, in the DNA since day one. Also going to sprinkle in some lifestyle stuff, especially on the channel there on YouTube, because not only with sports, but also with life too, but especially with this particular platform, I bring nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything That happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South Central, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.